The cup should have made that small happy clink against the saucer, the way it always did when Madame Oziyama lifted it with the calm hands of a woman who had seen 65 dry seasons and come out with her back still straight. Instead, it exploded, porcelain hitting tile like lightning, because Awero's fingers were quicker than fear. The coffee splashed across the marble of the lecky suburban kitchen, a dark sunburst around the white slippers of the man who had just whispered, "For strength, my love," while stirring a fine gray powder into the brew. Oziyama didn't speak. She hadn't spoken since the thyroid surgery 4 months ago, when her voice left like a frightened bird and never perched again. But her eyes spoke. They were the careful eyes of a retired civil engineer who had built flyovers and villages. Eyes that had learned to measure load and risk without using words. Those eyes were on the cup and on her husband, Tariye, who dropped a smile and picked up a frown as smoothly as a tie. "You mad?" he snapped, stepping back from the spill. "What is wrong with you, small girl?" Awero's chest hammered. She was only 22, skinny as a broomstick, with threaded twists pinned under a cheap scarf and a faded Ankara blouse that smelled faintly of smoke from the roadside Akara stand where her aunt still labored. People in the estate said she had too much light in her eyes for a girl so poor. They were lightning eyes now, flashing from the black coffee puddle to the silver teaspoon crusted with the last dust of that powder. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, voice trembling. "My hand slipped." From the breakfast bar, Madame Oziyama pressed her palm to her throat for a moment, then tapped twice on the table with a crooked finger. It was their language now, the one Awero had learned in the long, quiet afternoons. Tap twice for "Are you okay?" Tap once for "Stop." Slide your palm across the table for "Leave the room." But the old woman didn't slide her palm and she didn't tap once. She lifted her chin and looked at the teaspoon again. "What are you staring at?" Tariye barked. He recovered his charm as fast as a Lagos driver changes lanes. "I'll make another one. You, clean this mess." He turned his back and reached for the expensive tin of Ethiopian blend. That tin sat next to a wooden spice rack filled with small brown bottles, ginger, cloves, uziza, and one new bottle, unlabeled, which he had slid into the row last week like a stranger moving into a compound without greeting anyone. Awero had seen it. Awero saw everything. That was the job of a maid whose wages fed a mother in Ogbomoso and paid junior brothers WAEC fee. The job of a girl who could not afford to miss a sign. She knelt and began to mop. The coffee was warm through the cloth. Her hands shook as she wiped close to his shoes. She could smell the sharp, bitter almond floating above the bean scent, like crushed irisin bark, wrong in a kitchen. Cyanide was a word she had learned from a Nollywood film she never finished watching, because Auntie needed the small television for evening news. Cyanide smelled like bitter almonds, the actor had said, as his eyes rolled back. She had laughed then. Now the laugh was somewhere far away, on a different street. "Slowly," she told herself in a whisper only the mop could hear. "Don't show your teeth to a snake." When she stood, she felt Madame's eyes. The woman's Jill lay flat today, only a scarf around her head, lines soft as fabric pleats across her cheeks. Wealth had padded this kitchen with marble and silence, but hardship had built the woman herself, brick on brick. University in Nansuka when women were told to stay home. Years at the Ministry of Works when men coughed disrespect into their palms. A small farm in Epe she ran on Saturdays for joy and sanity. Now, in retirement, she funded boreholes in 3 villages and argued with contractors about mixing ratios. She wrote with her eyes. She laughed with her shoulders. She had no voice, but she had a name that held weight the way good concrete holds water. "Here," Tariye said, too brightly. He reached across Awero to put down a fresh cup, his hand brushing her arm. It wasn't a gentle brush. It was a warning. "How about you help your madam sit up? We won't let one silly accident spoil our morning." He set a teaspoon beside the saucer. Its surface still wore a faint sheen of powder. Not coffee. Not sugar. Something that left a taste in the air like metal on the tongue. A generator coughed to life somewhere on the next street. A mynah bird screamed laughter on the low fence beyond the sliding glass doors. The world continued its foolishness, and inside the kitchen, the girl who earned 20,000 naira a month felt her bones trying to vibrate out of her body. She glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m. The driver would come at 7 to take Madam for her checkup. The driver, Andrew, had eyes like someone who would tell the truth even if it hurt. But the driver wasn't here, and in these 5 minutes the life of a woman who had built roads might end on polished tile. "Let me taste it first," Aguero said, reaching for the cup. "Are you stupid?" he snapped, catching her wrist mid-air. The smile fell again, the mask clattering. "Do you have no sense? Move." His fingers bit into her. Not enough to leave a bruise, but enough to leave a memory in the skin. He'd been polite for months. He'd brought flowers to the hospital. He'd posted long captions about devotion and destiny under filtered photos of himself, holding her hand with that hollow smile. He had also loosened the estate's guards with tips and asked the cook to take a long leave, and told the accountant he would personally manage the disbursements of the charitable foundation, so my wife can rest. He was a kind of Lagos that wears perfume and keeps stones in its pocket. Madam tapped twice again. "Are you okay?" "I am," the girl mouthed, not trusting her voice. She glanced at the old woman's tea tray on the sideboard, the one with bitter leaf tea leaves in a glass jar, honey in a bowl, and a small ceramic charm from a wherry that Madam's late sister said kept away evil eyes. She saw a flicker of something in Madam's gaze, not fear, calculation, the same look she must have worn surveying soil before a bridge. "Drink," Tarja said to his wife, lifting the cup himself now, one hand sliding behind her shoulders as if to help. His other hand guided the saucer toward her lips. He smelled of citrus cologne and something like impatience. "For strength. Doctor said you need to keep your energy." In the split moment before porcelain met skin, before hot liquid met throat, before silence became permanent, the girl's body decided. She slammed the tray she held into the edge of his elbow. Metal rang. The cup jolted. Coffee flew again, a dark wave splattering his shirt, the tiles, her own arms. "Ah!" he shouted, jerking back. The cup wobbled, danced between his fingers, then spun away and died on the floor, a second white flower shattering at their feet. What is wrong with you?" His voice jumped an octave, then fell flat. "I said, what is wrong with you?" Madam flinched, then grabbed for her throat, coughing with no sound. Tears sprang to her eyes. They weren't from sadness. They were from the heat that had kissed her chin before the cup fell. Her mouth trembled. Her eyes, those measuring eyes, grabbed the scene and pinned it down, the way an engineer's hands peg a drawing to keep it from shifting. "Sorry, Ma," Aguero cried, stepping between them without thinking, her own heart slamming against her ribs like a prisoner against a door. "I'm sorry. I slipped again." "You slipped?" he said, laughing once, no humor. The laugh was a knife. "Twice? Are you mad? Are you trying to kill her with shock?" He started toward the sink, ripping paper towels. Coffee ran down his forearm in brown threads. As he turned, the kitchen sun caught on the tiniest film of gray lining the inside of the teaspoon he had set aside. The powder didn't dissolve all the way. It clung like guilt. If anyone asked later, he would say, multivitamin, herbal blend. He would say the words men say when they have already counted another person's money as their own. "Clean," he ordered, tossing the paper at the floor and stepping out. "I'll be in the study. Bring my phone." He left his phone, face down, on the counter. He left the small unlabeled bottle, too, hidden in plain sight by the uziza and the cloves. He left because he needed to breathe, because he needed to change his shirt, because rage travels faster than reason. He left because a girl from nowhere had put a hairline crack in his plan. The door clicked. Silence came back. Not the gentle silence of mourning, but the heavy kind, the one that presses on your back like a hand. Slowly, very slowly, Madam reached for Aguero's wrist. Her fingers were warm and dry, the skin paper soft. She tapped once. Stop. Then she held up her left hand and pointed to her ring finger, where the gold band sat steady as a small sun. She looked from the ring to the phone, then from the phone to the unlabeled bottle, then into the girl's eyes. "Do you understand?" her eyes asked. "Yes," the girl breathed, though her lungs didn't want to move. "I understand." She pulled a clean cup from the rack. She moved like a shadow, careful, careful. She poured fresh water from the kettle into a separate mug, dipped a different spoon, and set it aside. Then, with the corner of her apron, she lifted the unlabeled bottle and tilted it just enough. The powder inside glinted like rain in a gutter. Madam's fingers tightened. She shook her head once. "Don't touch." Okay, Awero whispered. We need proof. From the corridor came the faint sound of a door opening and closing, the soft thud of shoes on carpet, the sigh of a man talking to himself. Outside, a kiki honked. In the other villas, early prayers ended, kettles clicked, school uniforms were ironed. The world refused to stare at the miracle of a life not ending. A proverb her mother always said fluttered into Awero's mind like a sparrow. When a snake shows you its skin, don't wait to count its scales. She looked at the phone. She looked at the bottle. She looked at Madam's throat and thought of the quiet charity payments this woman sent to retired teachers whose pensions still hadn't come. She thought of the nursing home pamphlet she had seen peeking from the study desk, Peaceful Palms Retirement, with a circle around the words Full Medical Proxy. She thought of the way the driver, Andrew, had frowned last week when he noticed scratches on the back gate, as if someone was practicing how to open it fast. "Madam," she whispered, leaning in so the old woman could feel the warmth of her breath. "Should I call Andrew? Or the police? Or should I go into the study and pretend I didn't see anything and take his phone and—" Her words fell apart like a biscuit in tea. Madam lifted one finger, slowly, and drew an invisible line across the air between them, left to right. Not no. Not stop. The sign they had created for wait. Then she traced the letter S on the table with her fingertip. S. Silence, the girl breathed, remembering the first day Madam taught her that sign with a smile. Keep quiet. Gather. Think. Concrete first, then road. Foundation before ribbon. But how long could silence hold when a bottle of death sat in a kitchen nobody else would enter for the next 5 minutes, when a man who loved himself more than life might return any second to finish what a clumsy maid had interrupted, when one small decision could redraw the map of every person in this house? The girl's palm hovered over the phone. The bottle watched her like an eye. The old woman's fingers shook against the tabletop as she tapped twice, then once, then laid her hand flat in a plea as old as time. What should they do now? Expose him without proof and risk being thrown out, or drink the silence a little longer and gamble with a life? The study door was half open, the kind of careless door that meant someone inside wanted to hear the house breathe. Awero stood in the hallway, the mop bucket still damp against her skirt, her toes curled into the rug like they could keep her from falling. The hum of the air conditioner whispered over the silence. She could see Tarier's shadow moving across the bookshelves, hear the shuffle of papers, the steady rhythm of a man preparing his story before anyone dared to ask questions. Inside the kitchen, Madame Ozioma sat stiff in her chair, her eyes trained on her maid like a commander whose voice had been stolen but not her will. She had raised flyovers across Nigeria without raising her voice above calm command. Now, without a voice at all, she ruled with her eyes. Those eyes were steady on Awero. Go. Awero moved. Each step down the corridor was heavier than her body should allow. The study smelled of cologne, new leather, and something faintly sour, sweat beneath a mask. Tarier stood at the desk, dabbing coffee from his sleeve with tissues, his jaw tight enough to snap bone. The phone lay on the polished surface, its screen dark, its secrets buried under fingerprints. "Sir?" Awero began, but her voice cracked. She lowered her eyes, playing the small role expected of her. "Your phone. Madam asked me to bring it." He turned, quick as a whip. His eyes narrowed, then softened into that false warmth he carried like a second skin. "Ah, good girl." He picked up the device, tapped it, checked something with fast fingers. His smile flickered, then steadied. "You know," he said, lowering himself into the leather chair, "your madam is a lucky woman. Not every wife has a husband who takes care of every detail. Bills, foundations, even her health." His words were sugar, but his tone carried salt. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Tell me, Awero, you're loyal, yes? You would never betray the family that feeds you?" The question fell like a stone into water. Her breath caught. She could feel the truth beneath his words, the suspicion, the warning. He had noticed. Maybe her eyes lingered too long on the spoon, or her hands trembled too much when the second cup fell. Maybe snakes always knew when someone had seen their scales. "Yes, sir," she said quickly, forcing her lips into the shape of obedience. I would never betray you." His eyes held hers for one long moment. Then he chuckled and leaned back. "Good, very good. Go now, and tell your madam to rest. She must drink something today, whether she likes it or not." The dismissal was sharp. Awero dipped her head and slipped out, the door closing behind her like a gavel. Back in the kitchen, Madam had not moved. Her scarf sat askew, her shoulders trembling faintly. When Awero entered, their eyes locked. The girl shook her head. No proof yet. No safety yet. Madam's hand drifted to her wedding ring, twisting it once, twice. Then she picked up her pen and notepad from the counter, her voice on paper, and scribbled 2 words in sharp strokes. "Retirement home." Awero frowned. The same words she had seen on the pamphlet. Madam underlined them twice, then tapped the page. Her eyes burned with meaning. This is his plan, to silence me there, to sign my name away, to finish what coffee could not. The room seemed to tilt. A cicada screamed from the garden, long and shrill. Awero clutched the counter to steady herself. She wanted to cry, but tears would betray the silence Madam had demanded. She bit them back. "Madam," she whispered, "we can't wait. We must do something. Tonight, tomorrow, it could be too late." But Madam only lifted her finger again, traced the same letter across the table. S. Silence. The silence that builds bridges before floods come. The silence that gathers proof before thunder speaks. Awero pressed her palm flat on the table in reply. Her heart pounded, her chest hurt, but she understood. If they shouted too soon, nobody would believe a maid. Nobody would doubt a husband with charm and wealth and influence. They needed something stronger than words, something that would trap him with his own hand. From upstairs came the sound of a drawer slamming. Tarier's footsteps followed, steady, confident, like a man who thought the game was still his. The air grew heavier with every step. Awero reached for Madam's hand, squeezing it hard, promising without words, "I will not let him win, even if silence kills me first." The footsteps paused at the stair landing, then descended, one by one. And in that moment, Awero knew, the next time he stepped into this kitchen, silence alone would not be enough. The house was still as stone when Tarier's footsteps faded toward the garage. A car door slammed, and the growl of the Lexus swallowed the morning air. Only then did Awero allow herself to breathe properly. She turned to Madame Oziyama, whose pen was already scratching across the notepad with the urgency of thunderclouds before rain. "I saw this coming years ago." Her script was jagged, impatient. She underlined it once, then scribbled, "He was not my first choice." Awero's brows drew together. She had never heard Madame speak of her husband's beginnings, not even in passing. The old woman tapped the pad and gestured for her maid to sit. With her free hand, she pulled out a photo frame from the sideboard drawer. Inside it, under dusty glass, was a younger Oziyama, her cheeks firm, her eyes fierce, standing beside another man. Not Tarier. This man's shoulders were wide, his suit plain, his smile genuine. "My first husband," she wrote. "Okorie, a teacher. He died suddenly. They said heart attack, but—" Her pen slowed, hovered. Then, with one heavy line, she scratched, "I never believed." Awero's breath caught. "You mean, you think—" Oziyama's eyes answered with fire. "Yes." The silence deepened, heavy with revelations unsaid. Awero leaned closer as Madame's pen moved again, each word slicing through the page. "Tarier came after. Handsome, charming, much younger. I was lonely. Weak, my children abroad. He said he would take care of me in retirement." The pen pressed harder. "He took care of everything. Too much. Accounts, lawyers, doctors, even staff. He made himself the wall around me, and now the wall is closing." A cold shiver crawled down Awero's spine. She thought of the bottle in the kitchen, the spoon with its bitter almond dust. This was not just about greed. It was about history repeating itself. Perhaps Okorie had not died by nature. Perhaps silence had killed him too. "Why didn't you tell anyone, madam?" Awero whispered. "Your children? The police?" Madam shook her head bitterly. She tapped her throat, then scribbled again, "Who believes a voiceless woman? Who listens to the old?" Her words cut deeper than knives. Awero's eyes stung with tears. She saw it clearly now. The loneliness of aging in a country where respect for elders had thinned like worn cloth. Wealth had built Ozioma a mansion, but loneliness had opened its gates for a snake. A horn blared outside, snapping the moment. The driver, Andrew, had arrived. Through the window, Awero saw him step from the old Toyota, his dark skin shining with sweat, his shirt neat but frayed at the collar. Andrew was in his 40s, with the quiet dignity of a man who had seen both farm soil and city glass. His gaze swept the compound, cautious, alert. "Should we tell him?" Awero whispered, hope sparking in her chest. But Madame hesitated. Her pen hovered, then wrote, "Not yet. He will warn Tarie by mistake. Men talk. We need proof." Proof. The word was a mountain. Awero's mind raced. She thought of the small second-hand Nokia phone hidden in her apron pocket. Her own. No internet, no luxury apps, just calls, SMS, and the shaky camera that had once snapped her brother's graduation with grainy pride. She touched it now, her thumb trembling over the scratched keypad. "Proof," she echoed softly. "Then let us make him prove it himself." Madame's eyes sharpened, calculating. The old woman, once an engineer, was building again, this time not bridges of steel, but a trap made of silence and patience. Outside, Andrew knocked lightly at the door. "Madam," his voice called, "we are late for the clinic." Awero rose, her decision burning in her chest. She would hide the camera. She would record his hand dipping the powder into the cup. She would let the world see what silence had hidden for too long. But as she turned back, she caught Madame's eyes again. There was something else in them. Fear, yes, but also a shadow deeper than fear. A shadow that whispered, even proof may not be enough. He has friends. He has power. He knows how to bury stories. And Awero, standing between two worlds, the powerless maid and the powerful man, felt the weight of both crash upon her shoulders. The car engine started outside. Time was thinning like smoke. Would the trap work before the snake struck again? Or would silence swallow them both before proof could speak? Andrew's voice still floated through the front door, calm but insistent. "Madam, we are running late. The doctor will be waiting." Awero's fingers clenched her apron until the seams bit into her skin. She wanted to shout, to fling the door open and beg Andrew to save them both, but Madame's steady gaze pinned her in place. The old woman's hand shook as she wrote, "Not yet. He must show himself. We must trap him." Awero swallowed the lump in her throat. Her small Nokia weighed like a stone in her pocket. She had never thought the shaky lens would be used for anything more dangerous than capturing village weddings. Now, it felt like a weapon. She leaned toward Madame, whispering low, "I will keep the phone in the pantry. From there it can see the table. If he tries again, it will catch him. Even if nobody believes me, they will see him." Ozioma's wrinkled hand covered the girl's for a brief moment, warm and trembling. Her eyes softened, but only for a breath. Then they hardened again, the eyes of a woman who had once faced bulldozers and corrupt contractors and never bowed. Awero slipped from the kitchen, her heart thundering. She pushed aside sacks of rice and gari in the pantry until she found a high shelf. She angled the tiny phone toward the dining table, praying the shadows would hide it. The red recording light blinked once, then settled. Proof. If the world had patience to wait. From upstairs came the creak of a floorboard. Tarie's footsteps again. Measured, unhurried. The steps of a man who believed time was already in his hand. He descended, humming faintly. The kind of tune one hums when planning something wicked yet ordinary, like signing papers or digging graves. When he entered the kitchen, his shirt was changed, crisp white with gold cufflinks. His smile had returned too, sharp, polished. He glanced at Awero, then at his wife. "Are we ready for the clinic?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. "Madam, you need energy. Let me make you something lighter. Tea, perhaps." He walked straight to the spice rack, his hand brushing the unlabeled bottle. Awero's chest turned to fire. She looked at Madame, who gave no sign. Only her fingers drummed once against the table. "Wait." "Sir?" Awero said quickly, stepping forward, forcing her voice steady. "Let me prepare it. Madame trusts my hand." His eyes flickered with annoyance, then narrowed. "Your hand? The same hand that spilled 2 cups already? No. Sit." He reached for the kettle. Steam curled like a ghost. His other hand drifted to the bottle, casually, like a man reaching for salt. Awero's knees weakened. She prayed silently that the small phone lens was capturing every motion, every detail. But would it be enough? At that exact moment, Andrew stepped into the doorway, clearing his throat politely. His gaze swept over the scene. The kettle, the girl frozen in place, the husband too eager with his hands near the bottle. "Sir, madam," he said slowly, "the car is ready." Tarja froze for a fraction of a second, then smiled too wide. "Ah, Andrew. Good. Just making tea for my darling wife. You know she needs her strength." Andrew's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. His eyes, however, lingered too long on the unlabeled bottle. For the first time that morning, Awero felt something stir inside her chest. Hope. But it was dangerous hope, the kind that flickers in a storm. Because if Andrew suspected too much, one wrong word might cost them all. Andrew's hands were steady on the steering wheel, but his eyes, sharp, restless eyes that had watched both village roads and Lagos expressways, caught details most men ignored. For months, he had noticed small things in the Oziyama household. Madam's once radiant cheeks had thinned too fast. The medicines Tarja brought from special clinics were always unlabeled. The cook was suddenly sent on long leave, and Awero, poor girl with her frayed scarf, had grown watchful, too watchful, her gaze darting around the kitchen like a sparrow that had smelled smoke in the rafters. That morning, standing in the doorway, Andrew had seen the bottle, the one without a name. He had noticed Tarja's hand brush it, casual but deliberate. He said nothing then, but inside, a knot formed. He had worked for rich families before, seen greed in many faces, but this one carried the stench of something darker. In the car, Madame sat silently in the back seat, scarf neat but hands clenched in her lap. Awero sat beside her, pretending to adjust a handbag, but Andrew caught the small bulge of a hidden phone inside her apron. He did not ask. He knew better than to force words when silence was already heavy. Tarja reclined in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone with the smug calm of a man rehearsing victory. "Andrew," he said smoothly, "drive carefully. My wife's health is fragile. We don't want any accidents." The way he said accidents made the hair on Andrew's neck rise. "Yes, sir," Andrew replied, eyes fixed on the road, but his mind was racing. He thought of his own mother, widowed and frail, who lived in a nursing home outside Ibadan. He thought of the men who preyed on the elderly, who counted their pensions before they were even paid. He thought of Madame Oziyama, the woman who had once given him a loan for his daughter's WAEC fee without asking for repayment, a woman whose silence now screamed louder than shouts. No, Andrew told himself, he could not stand idle. But how? He was only a driver. His word against a wealthy man's? The police laughed at such cases unless evidence was loud. Evidence. His eyes flickered in the rearview mirror. He caught the faintest nod from Awero, her fingers brushing her apron where the phone lay hidden. A recording. Proof. Perhaps silence was not helpless after all. They reached the clinic, a modest but reputable building on the edge of Surulere. Nurses greeted them warmly. Tarja handled the papers, speaking over his wife as if her voice had died years before. Madame endured it with quiet grace, her eyes on the tiled floor. While Tarja stepped aside to take a call, Andrew leaned subtly toward Awero. "What are you planning?" he whispered, his voice low, meant only for her ears. Awero's eyes flicked to Madame, then back to him. "We will catch him," she breathed. "On camera. He cannot hide forever." Andrew's jaw tightened. He nodded once, a small pact sealed in silence. But even as he stood back, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. Men like Tarja did not go down without dragging others into the pit. And if the snake sensed the trap, who would bleed first? The voiceless woman, the poor maid, or the driver who saw too much? That evening, the mansion glowed like any wealthy home in the suburbs. Lights humming, generator buzzing, the faint smell of pepper soup rising from the kitchen. But under that comfort, shadows were gathering. Tarja sat alone in his study, door locked, curtains drawn. His gold cufflinks gleamed on the desk, tossed carelessly beside the unlabeled bottle. He held a glass of whiskey, swirling it with the calmness of a man whose patience was running out. He spoke aloud, though no one else was there. Perhaps to steady himself. Perhaps because snakes hiss even when no one listens. She is too stubborn, he muttered, sipping. Even voiceless, she resists. But the papers are ready. One more signature, and peaceful palms will take her in. Full proxy. No questions asked. He chuckled, low and bitter. He pulled out a folder, documents stamped with the logo of the retirement home. The last page carried Asiama's signature, shaky but legal. A signature he had guided her hand to make weeks ago when her body was still weak from surgery. All it takes is one more episode, he whispered, fingers stroking the rim of the bottle. One cup. One careless sip. They will call it old age. And I will be free. His phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. Funds ready once transfer confirmed. Move quickly. His lips curled into a smile. By the time the children return from abroad, there will be nothing left to fight over, nothing but my generosity. Downstairs, Awero crouched near the pantry door, heart pounding. She had come to fetch rice for supper, but froze when she heard his voice through the thin walls. Each word was a blade carving into her chest. Retirement home. Papers. Funds. She pressed a hand over her mouth. The small Nokia in her pocket was already full with minutes of shaky video from the morning. But this, his words, this was more dangerous, more precious. If only she could capture sound, too. Madame sat at the dining table, waiting for her meal. Her eyes, weary but sharp, followed Awero when she returned with trembling hands. The girl bent close and whispered, "He is planning it soon. Madam, we do not have much time." Oziama reached for her notepad. Her hand shook as she wrote, "We must move first. Tonight." Awero's throat went dry. Tonight? But how? Before Madame could answer, the door creaked. Taria's footsteps filled the hall. He walked in, smiling, holding the bottle behind his back as if it were nothing more than salt. "Awero," he said smoothly, "prepare tea for your madam. She needs to sleep well. Tomorrow will be a long day." His tone was velvet, but his eyes were knives. Andrew, who had just arrived from the garage, froze in the doorway. His gaze flicked to the bottle in Tarier's hand. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened. The room was a stage now, every actor holding their breath. Madame silent, her pen still. Awero clutching her apron pocket. Andrew rooted to the doorframe. And Tarier, the snake, standing tall, smiling, waiting. The kettle began to hiss. The trap was tightening, but would it catch the snake or snap shut on the innocent? The kettle shrieked. Steam curled upward, thin and ghost-like. Awero's hand trembled as she reached for the ceramic mugs. Her apron pocket buzzed faintly against her thigh, the little Nokia already set to record, its red light winking in the shadows of the pantry. Taria moved like a conductor before an orchestra, every gesture smooth, deliberate. He set the unlabeled bottle on the counter, close enough for everyone to see, but far enough to pretend it was nothing. "Use that one," he said lightly, pointing at the bottle. "Herbal supplement, doctor's orders." Andrew, standing by the doorway, shifted his weight. His eyes locked on the bottle, his lips pressed shut. One wrong word could end everything, but silence might be deadlier still. Awero glanced at Madame. The old woman sat still, her scarf loose around her head, her eyes burning with quiet fire. She tapped once against the table. "Stop," then twice. "Are you okay?" Her gaze never left her husband. "Yes, sir," Awero murmured, forcing her hand steady. She reached for the teaspoon, dipped it in sugar first, then let it hover over the bottle. Every muscle in her body screamed against it. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Go on," Taria said softly. His smile was wide, too wide. "Be a good girl." She tilted the bottle. A faint trickle of powder slid into the steaming tea, dissolving slowly, leaving that bitter almond scent curling into the air. Her stomach twisted. Andrew took a step forward, then stopped. The phone in her pocket blinked again, capturing it all. Awero stirred once, twice, then carried the cup to Madame with both hands. Her knees nearly gave way. She set it on the table directly before the woman whose silence had kept her alive. "Drink, my love," Tarier crooned, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite. His eyes glittered. "For your strength." The house seemed to lean in, The generator hummed low. Outside, the night insects sang. Inside, only the hiss of steam and the pounding of 3 hearts filled the air. Madame Ozayama reached for the cup. Her fingers shook. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She lifted it slowly, deliberately. The cup stopped just beneath her mouth. Her eyes flicked once to Awero, then to Andrew, then back to Tarier. And she smiled. Small, almost invisible, but real. In that moment, Awero realized Madame had her own plan. She set the cup back down without drinking. Instead, she slid the notepad across the table. 3 words, written in bold, dark strokes. You first, love. The silence cracked like thunder. Andrew's breath caught. Awero's heart nearly stopped. Tarier froze, his smile faltering. Would he sip his own poison to prove himself? Or would the mask finally tear apart before their eyes? For the first time that day, Tarier's smile broke. A fine crack split through it like sunlight, forcing its way into a locked room. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, pretending to laugh. Ah, Ozayama, he said, voice too smooth, too light. You still have that stubborn engineer's heart, always testing the foundations. He tapped the table once with his finger, as though the gesture might erase the challenge written on her notepad. But come now, don't you trust your husband? Madame didn't move. She sat tall, shoulders square despite the weight of years and silence. Her finger tapped once on the table. Stop. Then she pushed the cup closer toward him, her eyes locked on his like iron. Awero's throat tightened. Her small Nokia, hidden in the pantry shadows, was catching every moment. The bottle, the powder, the challenge. Proof stronger than any maid's word. Andrew cleared his throat. Sir, he said carefully, his voice steady but sharp with something unspoken. If it is safe, perhaps you should show her. It will put her mind at rest. Tarier's eyes snapped to the driver, cold and narrow. For a moment, the room froze. Then, with a low chuckle, he reached for the cup. His fingers curled around the handle. He lifted it halfway. Of course, he said, if that will satisfy you all. The cup lingered near his lips, steam curling up like a ghost. His eyes flicked once to the pantry door. Was he aware of the blinking light hidden there? Then back to his wife. Slowly, he tilted it. But at the very last second, he lowered it again and slammed the cup onto the table. Hot liquid sloshed over the rim, splattering across the notepad. You insult me, he spat, his mask gone now. After everything I have done for this family, you sit here and dare to question me? You think a common maid and a driver can teach me loyalty? His voice rose, echoing off the tiled walls. You forget who owns this house. You forget who controls the accounts. Without me, all of you are nothing. Awero flinched, but Madame did not. Her hand rested firmly on the wet notepad, her eyes steady as stone. Andrew stepped forward at last, his voice low and dangerous. Enough, sir. We all saw what you did, and we are not blind. If you will not drink, then we will show the world. Tarier's face drained of color. His gaze darted to Awero's apron. He had noticed. He knew. Phone, he barked, standing so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Give me that phone. Awero staggered back, clutching her pocket. Fear surged, but behind it something fiercer burned. The memory of her mother's words. When a snake bares its fangs, you do not hand it your skin. No, she whispered, her voice shaking but firm. The air was thick with danger now. The snake had shed its velvet skin, showing only fangs, and the trap was ready to spring. The moment cracked open like thunder. Tarier lunged across the table, his hand clawing toward Awero's apron. His eyes were wild, his polished mask shattered, revealing nothing but raw hunger and fear. Awero shrieked and stumbled backward, clutching the phone to her chest. The chair toppled, crashing against the tiles. For a heartbeat, she thought his hand would close around her wrist, drag her into the pit with him. But Andrew moved first. With the speed of a man used to lifting sacks of yam and steering buses through mad Lagos traffic, he shoved himself between them. His shoulder slammed into Tarier's chest, forcing him back a step. Enough! Andrew roared. His voice filled the kitchen like a storm. Tarier snarled. You dare touch me? A servant like you? He swung his arm, striking Andrew across the jaw. The sound cracked through the air. Andrew staggered but did not fall. His eyes burned now, the calm dignity gone, replaced with something fierce. "I am no servant to poisoners," he growled. Madame Ozuyama banged her palm on the table, her frail hand trembling but commanding. She scribbled furiously on the drenched notepad, pushing it toward them. The words bled in ink and tea but were clear. "Show the world." Awero's breath heaved. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the small Nokia free, the red recording light blinking steady. She held it up, high, so that Tarie could see the truth. He had been caught. His face, his hand on the bottle, his fury now. All of it was sealed in the shaky lens of a poor maid's phone. "You think anyone will believe you?" Tarie spat, his voice shrill. "A voiceless old woman, a penniless girl, and a driver with debts? I have friends, I have power, I will bury you all before—" His words cut off as Andrew seized his wrist. The two men wrestled, crashing against the counter. The unlabeled bottle tipped, spilling its gray powder across the floor like ashes. The bitter almond scent filled the air, undeniable now. Awero gasped. She kicked the bottle away, watching it spin under the pantry shelves. Proof lay in the smell itself, in the dust on the tiles. "Stop this, sir!" Andrew barked, pinning him against the counter. "Your wife deserves peace, not poison." Madame rose slowly from her chair, her body trembling with age but her eyes blazing with strength. She picked up the notepad again and scrawled with shaking strokes, "You will answer. Tonight." She held it up, her hand steady despite the tremor in her bones. For the first time, Tarie faltered. His breath came ragged, his face pale. He looked at the words, then at the red blinking light in Awero's hand, then at Andrew's grip on his wrist. And for a flicker of a moment, the snake looked cornered. But cornered snakes strike hardest. His free hand slipped behind him, fumbling at the drawer near the stove. A glint of steel flashed. A knife. Awero's scream split the silence. The knife gleamed under the fluorescent light, its edge trembling in Tarie's grip. His chest rose and fell like a man drowning, his eyes darting between the phone in Awero's hand and the steady grip of Andrew pinning him to the counter. "You think you can trap me?" he hissed, his voice a rattling whisper. "This house is mine. Her wealth is mine." "Not tonight," Andrew shot back, shoving his wrist hard against the counter. The blade clattered, scraping metal against marble, but Tarie still clung to it with desperate fingers. Awero's heart thundered. She could taste the metallic fear on her tongue, but her hands refused to lower the phone. She had captured enough. His face twisted with greed, the poison spilled, the knife flashing. Every second was proof carved into light. "Sir, stop this madness!" Andrew barked, straining against him. "The world will see. Even your friends cannot bury what's in that phone." Tarie roared like a trapped animal and shoved forward with all his strength, the knife arced toward Andrew's side. Madame Ozuyama rose, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. Her frail hand gripped her walking stick, the same polished wood her late husband once gave her as a gift after her thyroid surgery. With surprising force, she slammed it down across Tarie's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, spinning harmlessly under the table. Silence filled the kitchen. Tarie froze, his eyes wide in disbelief. He looked at the old woman, his wife, the woman he had tried to erase, standing taller than her voice, her silence heavier than thunder. Ozuyama bent, picked up her soaked notepad, and with trembling strokes wrote one final line. "You wanted silence. Now silence buries you." She turned the page for him to see. For Awero. For Andrew. For the red blinking light. Tarie's mouth opened, but no words came. For once, he was the voiceless one. Andrew tightened his grip and growled, "It's over." He kicked the knife farther away, then reached into his pocket. The phone number of the police chief, an old school friend, flashed in his mind. Awero stepped forward, her chest still heaving, and lifted her little Nokia higher. "The world will see this," she whispered, her voice firm despite her tears. "No more hiding, no more pretending." That night, the police arrived. They bagged the bottle, took the spilled powder, collected the knife. Tarie raged, shouted about lies, about betrayal, about servants conspiring. But the video on Awero's phone spoke louder than his words. Neighbors peered from gates, murmuring. They had once envied his polished charm. Now they saw the snake beneath the suit. As the officers led him away in handcuffs, Madame Ozuyama stood by the doorway, her scarf loose around her shoulders. She raised her chin, her silence not weakness but power. And when Owero slipped her hand into hers, the old woman squeezed back, soft, firm, full of quiet strength. The girl had been poor, voiceless in her own way. The woman had been rich, silenced by age and illness. Together they had turned silence into proof, proof into justice. The mansion grew quiet again, but it was no longer a silence of fear. It was the silence of survival, of dignity restored. And in that silence, Madame Oziama finally smiled. Not at wealth, not at revenge, but at the poetic justice that came when a poor maid refused to bow to fear.